The Model T had an enormous effect on the world at large.
It was the perfect car at the perfect time.
It just hit sort of all the points that people wanted, and bingo. Over time, they sold 15 million of them.
The Model T was in production for nearly 20 years, introduced in 1908, built right up through May of 1927. A lot of Ford's executives and his engineers realized, even by 1922-23, that the car was a dinosaur. It was time to be replaced.
By 1927, it really was obsolete. One reason he stuck with the Model T is that he didn't like the idea of people buying all these luxuries that he didn't think were really necessary. He thought the Model T was all the car you ever really needed.
The world had changed. It's the roaring 20s, and people now are buying cars that reflect their personality, their lifestyle. And so they were looking elsewhere.
So Ford finally and reluctantly was convinced it was time to let the car go. And within Ford Motor Company, there was a realization that this is a special event. This is the passing of an era.
They'd already done commemorations of the 5 millionth, the 10 millionth Ford. They were out now up to 15 million. Something more than 15 million were made. But symbolically, this was the end of the Model T.
May 26, 1927, the 15 millionth Model T rolls off the assembly line at Highland Park.
All of the executives and the VIPs came out. Henry Ford and Edsel Ford were there to watch this car come off the line. If we had to describe the changeover that last day when the 15 millionth Model T was built in one word, I think that word would probably be bittersweet.
Edsel Ford, Henry's son, who was officially the president of the company, was driving the car off the line. Henry was sitting in the passenger seat. There's a wonderful picture of Henry and Edsel. Edsel looks happy. He's finally glad to see this car laid to rest.
He's finally convinced his father they're going to lose leadership in the automobile industry if they don't replace the Model T.
Henry, on the other hand, has got this pensive look on his face because he doesn't really know what the future brings. He's spent much of his life to come to this point where he's created this car and this company and this production system, and now it's all going to have to change.
Henry Ford has given in and is probably very melancholy, very upset about his baby, the Model T, going away. They drive it from there to the Ford Engineering Laboratory in Dearborn, where it's displayed with one of the first 1909 Model Ts and Henry Ford's first car, the quadricycle.
You know, this is it. This is where we started. This is where we are now, and we're ready to move on to the next thing.
The day previous, the engine was made. Some of the original workers were there to strike the 15 million onto the engine. Each one had an opportunity to hit one of those digits.
I would describe this car as a window into 1927. This is a preserved example of the vehicle just as it came off the Ford assembly line. Granted, it was a special vehicle and that was the last one, but it's not as though they did anything different in the production techniques. It was still built the same way as any of those other cars at that time. It's hard to find original examples of these vehicles, but this is one. So this car becomes kind of the textbook or the reference source for people who want to find out how did they do that all those years ago.
The chassis, the engine, the transmission, the flywheel magneto, it's all virtually the same as the first Model Ts that were produced in 1908.
This car really never lived life out in the wild. It was always held back by Ford, realizing it was a special piece, needed to be preserved.
It was brought over here to Greenfield Village, is on display at the Mack Avenue plant. And it's been out here and been at the village since 1927. Greenfield Village is a must-see open-air museum. There you'll get to ride in an authentic Model T.
People will get into them sometimes and say, oh, this is a nice replica, or this is a pretty well-built copy. No, those are real cars.
The 15th millionth Model T is significant because in that era, making 15 million cars was a paradigm change. It literally changed our lives. It is an object that brings people together. So the purpose of that 15th millionth Model T is the question of what is the next Model T in the world? What is that next paradigm change?